David, before we introduce everybody else, just the news is just again. I almost feel like you need to take Israel out of so many of these headlines and just put Netanyahu. Because you look at what Netanyahu has done, you look at his attacks into Syria, you look at his attacks everywhere. I mean, and this is a guy who is just going to war with absolutely everyone. And, you know, most of the people, a lot of people inside of Israel have been saying for a long time, he will never stop fighting because the second he does, his government falls to the ground.
That's the question, and it is about Netanyahu. He has been incredibly aggressive here. There's been moments for ceasefires, and he's scuttled those talks. And, yeah, critics say he's simply doing this to stay in power. So it was an amazing, unprecedented thing to have Israel strike Doha. That has not happened.
By the way, Doha, we all have had issues with Doha through the years. Make no mistake, though, right now, they are a close ally of the Trump administration and somebody that this administration and past administrations have depended on to be able to communicate with our enemies.
Yes, the U.S. has asked Doha to have Hamas. This was years before October 7th, but those Hamas leaders were meeting to talk about the current Trump administration proposal for a ceasefire. That's why they were there. And Netanyahu chose to strike them.
So let's get into it. We have two more Davids with us, columnist and associate editor for the Washington Post, David Ignatius.
Good morning of 1,000
and
Davids.
Senior writer for The Dispatch and a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, David Drucker, is with us.
Some very unimaginative parents with names.
Yeah. I like the name
ago.
so much.
David's a great name.
The White House is rebuking Israel for its attack in Qatar's capital. Yesterday, the Israeli military carried out an airstrike in Doha, targeting the leaders of Hamas. While some Hamas members died, the terrorist group says its senior figures were not killed in the attack. A member of Qatar's internal security forces was also killed, and a number of civilians were injured. Qatari officials criticized Israel for the strike, calling it, quote, an attempt to destabilize regional security. The move now hampers the diplomatic efforts to reach a ceasefire in the Gaza war, as Qatar has been a key mediator in the discussions. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the strike was in response to Monday's shooting at a bus stop in Jerusalem. Hamas has claimed responsibility for that attack. Netanyahu also made it clear the strike in Doha was initiated and conducted by Israel. President Trump posted on Truth Social that he was notified of the attack by the U.S. military, not Israel, shortly before it happened, and tried to warn Qatar, adding, this does not advance Israel or America's goals.
David Ignatius, this is, as we said before, just continued escalation, continued fighting, well past the time, again, that military leaders and intel leaders in Israel say that anything positive can happen as they move forward. We were at diminishing returns a year ago, according to them, not according to Western news outlets, not according to Israel's enemies, according to Israel's military and intel leaders. Give us the 30,000-foot view, not just of the attack yesterday, but also Netanyahu attacking the new government in Syria, Netanyahu in Iran, Netanyahu all across the region. It seems that he has decided to conduct an eternal war in Israel, all at a time when his political rivals and most foreign policy observers say he's doing it to stay in power.
Joe, I think this is about how the war is going to be terminated. Netanyahu increasingly believes that a military end of the war is the only thing that is in his government's interest, in Israel's interest, and so the Israeli military is moving forward in Gaza City, in effect reinvading parts of Gaza, pushing toward a forced surrender, in effect, of Hamas fighters there. Meanwhile, the United States has continued to pursue negotiations, and what's haunting about the attack yesterday is that these Hamas leaders were gathered to discuss whether to accept what President Trump on Sunday called a final proposal for settling the conflict that would have involved immediate release of all 48 hostages being held in Gaza, would have begun the release of 1,000 or more Palestinian prisoners in Israel, along with a much greater role for the United States in thinking about the day after. So that's the negotiating plan that was blown out of the building in Qatar where these people were meeting. I can't imagine that a negotiating process will continue. And more to the point, Qatar's role as the principal way of passing messages between the U.S. and Israel and Hamas, at least for now, is over. Qatari officials told me that yesterday, and their prime minister, Sheikh Mohammed, said the same thing. So we're entering this endgame period in the Gaza war in which Israel seems to be relying almost entirely now on military power and walking away from what had been a real effort by the United States, by President Trump, to get a final diplomatic solution. So we have the two allies split. Well, and to free the hostages. That was part of the deal, Joe. The deal that is, as I say, was bombed out of existence, would have involved immediate moves toward release of the hostages.
So David Rode, that raises the question now, what's left for Netanyahu? If he's literally blown up the diplomatic negotiations, Israel not alone in being skeptical that Hamas is a credible partner in that. We can put that to the side for just a moment. But if not diplomatic negotiations trying to be brokered by President Trump through Steve Witkoff, then what are the options, number one? And then the other piece of it is, from the American point of view, what does President Trump do about this? He clearly was not happy yesterday.
Yes. So to Bibi and his supporters, there's a military solution. You're just going to wipe out Hamas. You're going to defeat them militarily. The question is, there are still 2 million Palestinians living in Gaza. Where do they go? How are they governed? And how do you not create another generation of militants? At least, according to Palestinian health authorities, 60,000 Palestinians have died. You raised the recent reports by international organizations that there is famine now in Gaza City. So the idea that you eliminate Hamas and this whole problem goes away is, according to critics, unrealistic. So it's an extraordinary moment. He thinks he can win militarily. And the question is, what does President Trump do now? This was a defiant move. Our colleagues, Courtney Kube and Tom Winter, were told that the U.S. was informed about the strike, but there was no request for permission. It just happened.
Well, and David Drucker, neither presidents will like the comparison, but Donald Trump and Joe Biden seem to be in the same exact position with Benjamin Netanyahu. Joe Biden daily would grouse about Netanyahu, would call him, would push him, would cajole him, would threaten him, would do everything he could do to try to get the hostages home, to bring an end to the war, get the hostages home. Now we have Donald Trump, who supposedly was going to be in a position to have an impact on Netanyahu. And things have actually gotten worse. If you look at the reports of famine in Gaza, if you look at just the horrific treatment of the Palestinians in Gaza, if you look at the attacks on Syria, which was certainly against President Trump's wishes as he tries to build that government into a functioning government. You look at Qatar, Trump and his family are close allies, both politically and personally, with Qatar. It's got to be shocking to Donald Trump that he finds himself in the same position as Joe Biden, an American president who Netanyahu constantly thumbs his nose in his face.